no matter what the genre, what the form, if somebody says that I don't like this music, it means you haven't heard it enough. So I think the perception is not that it's boring. I think it's more, the perception is more that it's inaccessible. So there is no art form which is a self-sustaining art form. You always need to make an industry out of something. There is no conflict between art and commerce. There is nothing wrong with being commercially successful. You're not getting commercial success does not also make your art any inferior.
There is a perception about classical music that it is boring, that it is something that youth will not be interested in. It is not packaged in a certain way. And according to you, it is a myth. Can you explain what the myth is?
So I think the perception is not that it's boring. I think it's more, the perception is more that it's inaccessible. And and people, rather than glorifying the fact that it's an acquired taste, I think it's been more drummed into us that it's a taste which is difficult to acquire. I mean, yes, it is an acquired taste, but it's not difficult to acquire. So let's first get that straight. If it would have been difficult to acquire, then you wouldn't have so many generations of musicians going out there into the West or going to places like China, Thailand, to the Far East, all over the world, and appealed to not only the normal listeners of that place, but also to people who are practitioners of different forms of music. If you have a Yudi Menwin to a Yo-Yo Ma appreciating the value of Indian classical music, then what is the basis for saying that it's, and these are not people who, if you have somebody like John McLaughlin, he has actually learnt Carnatic music, but there are so many great masters who have just loved the music, and when I talk to somebody like Antonio Sanchez, he says, wow man, your beats the grooves are so wonderful. So it essentially shows a lack of awareness, a lack of musical education when you make a statement like that. As much as it shows a lack of awareness and a lack of the view, lack of the larger view, when people say that, oh, this music is the only and the best form of music in the world, because neither is true. There are so many musical cultures. There are so many ways of interpreting music, and look, it eventually boils down to something very empirical and primal. It is sound. It is, at the end of the day, it is sound stretched over time. If you were to define music, it is just in our younger days, they used to make this candy from sugar. They would boil sugar and stretch it thinly on a sheet of paper. So if you think of the sheet of paper as time and the boiled sugar as sound, then that's music. You basically stretch sound over time. No matter what the genre, what the form, if somebody says that I don't like this music, it means you haven't heard it enough. If you talk about Indonesian gamelan music, because I spent some time in Indonesia, that is a tradition. That has its own fun. That has its own, if you look at the Japanese taiko drums, this is people expressing themselves through their perception of sound stretched over time. So what is interesting and what is boring, people are quick to judge, okay? And what is difficult to acquire, nothing is difficult to acquire. You just have to acquire it. Till you acquire it, you won't know if it's difficult to acquire. That's one thing. I think the other thing is that when you talk about something being youth-centric or not, look, how did yoga become youth-centric? When did yoga become such a hip And it became that because there are great yogis who have taken great pains in going out into the West and telling them the value of this thing, or Ayurveda, for instance, naturopathy, homeopathy. Since when have these things become alternative lifestyle? I mean, for that matter, becoming vegan. When you become aware of what is good for the planet, is when you think about reducing your carbon footprint, right? And that's not going to be easy, because it's much easier not to be aware, right? It's much easier to just sit in your little neighborhood and consume whatever you can, whatever you are getting, whatever is right in front of you, which may be the worst stuff in the world, or it may be good stuff in the world, but you cannot judge till you have the larger view. So I would say that people who make these kind of perceptions, but we are also at fault, because we have mystified our music. We have spoken about this taking a few lifetimes. When you say something like that, you are instantly alienating a young kid who is not prepared to give you a few lifetimes. So it's and while it is true that it may, but anything takes a few lifetimes. I believe that if we had Albert Einstein figure out the theory of relativity, he may have had a vision in another lifetime about it, and it may have culminated and come out as E equal to mc square in this life of his. When you hear Paco de Lucia play, he must have acquired that skill in another life, and it may not be necessarily the skill of playing guitar, but the vision of music, or the vision of expressing himself. As I said, sound stretched over time. And nothing can be as easy or as empirical as that, and nothing can give you more joy than to hear a set of frequencies come together in perfect time. So if you are willing to open your mind and your heart, you will receive, otherwise you won't.
Purbayan, do you think after being a musician over a period of time, genres fade? They blend. There's no strict demarcation after some point.
It's a little bit like being a global citizen. After you've traveled a little bit in different parts of the world and seen different cultures. At one time, when you spoke to an Indian person about sushi, they would say, "Oh, raw fish." If you talk to a teenager now and say sushi, they'll say, "Oh yeah, there's a sushi place around the corner." When I grew up, especially, if you spoke of an augmented chord or an inverted chord, or using something with a +9 or a +13, you would say, "Oh, this sounds jarring," and now it's like it's harmonically speaking, it may be a dark harmony, or it may be something which creates mystery, but it's music. When we were young kids, if we had the sound of, let's say, a metal rubbing on metal, and we would say, "Oh, this is not a musical sound." But then there's a producer who has found a way of making that work with a certain kind of music to make it art, and so eventually you realize, as I said in answer to your previous question, is that you are interpreting sounds with music. So after you've studied, but you have to get in depth into a few genres. You have to like classical or folk or jazz or whatever you want to get into, or Western classical or symphony or heavy metal or whatever. But once you have studied them a little bit in depth, and once you also realize your own identity and your own place in the whole thing, then you realize you're just interpreting sound, and that's all it is.
Do you think Indian classical music in itself is a self-sustaining industry?
So first of all, to set the record straight, there is no conflict between art and commerce. There is nothing wrong with being commercially successful, just as there is nothing wrong with being artistically successful and commercially not so successful. These are just your destiny. You can be commercially very, very successful and do practice a form of art which is not foremost in your heart, and that's just your destiny. Or you could totally do what you love and get commercial success for it. But just the fact that, first of all, the fact that you get commercial success doesn't undermine your art, and also the fact you're not getting commercial success does not also make your art any inferior. So that's the first thing I would like to say. But at the same time, the two, in an ideal world, the two should have a very symbiotic relationship. Your art should thrive with commercial success, because commercial success gives you a kind of confidence. Commercial success gives you an ability to think outside the box. If you want to do an experimental project, then you would have the wherewithal to go out and do it if you were commercially successful, right? So there is no art form which is a self-sustaining art form. You always need to make an industry out of something. Indian classical music, I would say, in India is a bigger industry than some forms of experimental music that exist. I think Indian people, because we were brought up to, despite all the how much we sort of look to the West for our films, for our cultural sort of inputs, but still we are born Indian. So our philosophy, our thought process, we understand this music, we love this music, which is why if you see the successful mainstream classical musicians still have bigger public audiences in a concert venue than maybe some other forms of music. Bollywood, when it comes to films and Bollywood, of course films are a very mass kind of medium. So if you have a film song, you have to understand it is not only music, it's a segment of a bigger story which has been told to hundreds and thousands of people in theaters across the world. But I think with the internet and with OTTs, a lot of things have changed, because there are other ways of telling your story. Everybody can publish their own album, everybody can begin putting drops in the ocean. And just imagine this whole world of independent music. So many people are actually contributing to this ocean. So the sort of quantitative or qualitative judgment of this is going to happen in the next decade. I think a lot of things will change for the better.
What are the challenges that you face as an Indian classical musician in our country?
I'll be honest, I have never really tried to harp on the challenges. There are challenges that you face in every genre. I mean, the kind of grief and sorrow that exists in the commercial world, kind of disillusionment that singers face every day trying to become successful playback singers, is nothing compared to, I mean, we are prepared to starve, we are prepared to not get work for some time, but that comes with the territory. That is not only for classical music, that is for anything. If you are successful in anything, I mean, there are so many doctors whose practice doesn't take off. They may have studied and they have expectations. So it really depends on what is your expectation. And as a classical musician, it is wrong to have the expectation of a mass medium like films. If you want to be a classical musician, if you want to become somebody who is producing or a music director for films, then you should have those priorities set. You should make that choice, and then there will be no disillusionment. And the challenges, like, I mean, sometimes I will go and perform somewhere maybe in a remote town somewhere, and the sound, the PA system won't be that good. Now I can tell myself, oh, classical music is so challenging because I don't get a good PA system, but that's not the thing. It's because it's a remote village. I mean, Bollywood artists may have gone there and gotten a bad PA system. Yes, they may be making more money, but I may be having more respect, or he may be having more respect. I mean, it's all very, very relative. But I think one needs to, if you face certain challenges, it is better not to harp and complain about it, because there are things that you can change about this world, and there are things that you cannot change about this world. So you should focus on the things that you can change. But if you want to change the world, you've got to change yourself first. That's the main thing. So if I feel that classical, propagating the classical music art form is a challenge, because it is a niche subject, and it is sort of tough to get across to younger people, then I should work on my vocabulary. I should work on my skills of communication so that I can come closer to them. I think that's the only answer.
Okay, Purbayan, what do you think, according to you, is the greatest feeling of being an Indian classical musician?
I think, personally speaking, the greatest validation is when you have a great master from some other musical culture come and tell you that you are a true maestro, and they're not telling you that because of your following on Instagram, or they are actually listening to your music, so you feel like you've gotten through to them by doing nothing but just playing relevant musical phrases, maybe responding to how maybe they have come up with a harmonic pattern and I've played a phrase on it. And I think that is the greatest source of validation. The other source of validation is getting, for me personally, is to get a chance to perform with people who have been your idols. I think then, making music is together is a very personal thing. If somebody allows you to make music with them, it is the greatest source of validation for me.
How has technology influenced your music, or how have you merged technology and music?
Music as we have it today, modern, in its modern form, in its modern live format, is very much married to technology, because you cannot achieve the kind of sound audio production that you want to without a good microphone, for instance, or a good PA system. If you want to record something like when we recorded Unbounded, or even when we recorded Saath Saath, my engineers, who are amazing, Aditya Srinivasan and Jay Krishnan, they had positioned a couple of ribbon mics behind the sitar, and they put it at a specific distance to capture the air of the room as well as to capture the body of the instrument. A deep understanding of all this, a deep understanding of technology when you produce music, especially when you put on your producer hat, how you can play it bar by bar, how you can play around with sounds. It's an inherent part of the music now, so you can't separate the two. And for me, I love the process because I love technology. I loved taking things apart when I was a kid. Whether it was an electronic typewriter or it was a computer, I would try to install Macintosh software on Windows computers. I mean, I've been doing that, how to sort of find little loopholes within the system. So now I do it with my musical equipment.
Let's talk about your NFTs that you are working very hard on.
Yeah, actually, I am not working hard on them at all, but I'm lucky that I have a wonderful team, and they are coming out with this website called Pursuits of Purbayan, and I don't want to give too much away, but I want to say that it's soon going to be out. I'm going to be the first Indian classical musician to the best of my knowledge. I can't comment if I don't know. I hope that the launch happens soon, but as far as I know, I'm the only one who's putting it out right now, and there will be NFTs ranging from me in a spacesuit playing the sitar to an Arabic dress with headgear, to like a Mundo HT, which is the so they've designed all kinds of things. Some of it pretty sort of out of the box, and I'm looking forward to the launch.
What, according to you, is the future of sitar?
Extremely bright, because we have a lot of very talented young performers in every corner of the country, and indeed in across the shores also. There are so many talented players in the UK, in the US, which was not the case. Like the number of talented people who are there in foreign countries is also amazing. So the future is very bright. You have larger numbers of people playing sitars. You have larger number of sitars being ordered to sitar makers. So I would say it's a very very bright future. The only thing is, we tend to compare. We tend to compare a sitar maker's production with a cell phone manufacturer's production, and that's not right. I mean, that's like comparing chalk and cheese. So that's the only thing where we might get disillusioned, but the future in itself is very bright.
Thank you, Purbayan. That was a wonderful interaction.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you once again for having me on your program, and I really truly value this association that I have.